Welcome back. Okay, let's just jump straight into this explainer, because we have got to unpack a highly volatile day of global news. Honestly, today's updates really force us to connect the dots between major geopolitical shifts, the literal realities hitting your wallet, and worldwide justice. We've got a lot of ground to cover, and looking at the sheer volume of global events from July 20, 2026, it is incredibly clear that isolation just isn't an option anymore. What happens over there directly impacts what happens right here, and we're going to break down exactly how, using the facts straight from the source.
So, here's our roadmap for today. We've got 4 main areas we're hitting. 1. The Middle East conflict escalating. 2. Global economic shockwaves. 3. Worldwide political unrest. And 4. Law, justice, and crises.
All right, let's kick things off with part 1. Middle East conflict escalates, with kinetic threats unfolding.
I mean, the sheer speed of this escalation is absolutely staggering. It all started with an attempt at peace, right? Mediators from Pakistan and Qatar proposed a 10-day emergency ceasefire to try and revive regional peace talks. But wow, look at how fast that deteriorated. Just 12 hours later, Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian is in a public address declaring that Iran is officially engaged in a full-scale war with the United States. And the physical fallout was immediate. By hour 16, 2 Greek-operated oil tankers off the coast of Oman were struck by unknown projectiles. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps then claimed both vessels exploded in the Strait of Hormuz. Then, fast forward to hour 20, and the conflict reaches Jordan. Jordan's military managed to intercept 3 incoming Iranian missiles, but targeted strikes on a military installation still injured several American soldiers and damaged military helicopters.
So, in direct response to that rapidly unfolding crisis, U.S. military forces actively enforced a maritime blockade on Iranian ports today. According to U.S. Central Command, they took definitive, immediate action to secure the area. They actively redirected 7 commercial ships and totally disabled another to enforce this blockade. It's a massive physical commitment to what is quickly becoming a very intense maritime standoff.
And the ripple effects just kept spreading across the wider region. Over in Yemen, Houthi authorities officially declared an immediate maritime blockade of their own against Saudi Arabia. They're basically citing this as a response to what they call an aggressive siege maintained by Riyadh against Yemen for nearly 12 years. Meanwhile, in another massive regional shift, Hamas has officially named its new chief leader. After months of a leadership vacancy, Khalil al-Hayya was named as the new top political leader, succeeding Yahya Sinwar.
And you might be sitting there thinking, okay, naval blockades and shifting regional leadership on the other side of the world are a big deal, but how does this actually affect me? Why does this matter to the average person going about their day?
Well, that brings us right to part 2, global economic shockwaves, or the actual price of all this instability.
This is exactly where it hits your wallet. That worsening blockade in the Persian Gulf directly triggered a huge spike in global oil markets. All that volatility abroad immediately pushed Brent crude past $90 a barrel. And because everything is connected, that global spike is actively driving nationwide retail gasoline prices in the U.S. above $4 a gallon. It is a literal textbook example of how quickly geopolitical friction turns into a hidden tax on your everyday commute.
Meanwhile, it's not just the Middle East causing economic waves. Right here in North American trade, a major diplomatic spat is actively messing with cross-border commerce. U.S. President Donald Trump is currently threatening new 50% tariffs on Canadian imports, specifically citing complaints about Canadian wildfire smoke drifting down into the U.S. On the flip side, Ontario Premier Doug Ford hit back with a really specific counterproposal. He urged the president to drop existing lumber tariffs and actually send water bombers up north to help fight the fires, rather than just issuing tariff threats. It's wild, right? We're seeing environmental issues literally morph into complex trade disputes.
Moving right along to part 3, worldwide political unrest. Let's look at some major leadership shakeups and global protests.
Over in the UK, the political landscape shifted dramatically today. Following the resignation of Sir Keir Starmer, Andy Burnham has officially stepped in and taken office as the new Prime Minister. And just to show you how completely intertwined these global stories are, his inaugural phone call was with U.S. President Donald Trump. What did they talk about? Specifically, the security situation in the Strait of Hormuz and ongoing trade relations.
In New Delhi, things reached a boiling point with severe civil unrest centered entirely around education and national standards. Thousands of student protesters marched on Parliament House over irregularities in the national NEET medical entrance exams, and things escalated fast. Indian riot police used baton charges to disperse the crowds, and local internet access was completely restricted in the area. The students' core demand is crystal clear: They want the immediate resignation of Education Minister Dharmendra Pradhan.
Then, looking over to Latin America, we saw a profound, frankly historic shift. Nicaraguan co-president Daniel Ortega officially announced that the nation will hold no further democratic elections. His reasoning? He stated the cancellation is necessary to build a wall against political opposition groups. It's an incredibly stark pivot away from the democratic process in the region.
Finally, we hit Part 4, Law, Justice, and Crises, where we examine global enforcement and the human toll.
$15 billion. Just let that number sink in for a second. A federal judge in New York handed Sinaloa cartel co-founder Ismael El Mayo Zambada a life sentence after he pleaded guilty to leading the international drug cartel. But alongside that sentence, the judge attached this massive $15 billion forfeiture order. It's a monumental figure that really attempts to quantify the absolute immense financial scale of global cartel operations. Back on the domestic front, federal law enforcement is quite literally under a microscope right now. Federal agents with U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, are currently facing highly intensified public and congressional oversight. Following recent fatal shootings by federal agents, scrutiny is heavily ramped up regarding their training, recruitment, and overall oversight standards. It really highlights a growing national conversation about the protocols and accountability of our federal enforcement agencies.
Now, looking at the absolutely devastating civil war in Sudan, it's fascinating to see the dual international response to a rapidly worsening humanitarian crisis. On one hand, you have the punitive side. The U.S. State Department enacted fresh sanctions against the military junta, citing evidence that they used chemical weapons, specifically chlorine gas, in the conflict. On the other hand, Saudi Arabia's King Salman Humanitarian Aid attempted to alleviate the terrible conditions on the ground by actually landing a cargo plane directly into Khartoum, delivering emergency medical and food supplies as distribution capabilities in the country continue to just collapse.
We're also tracking some serious infrastructure chaos across Asia today caused by extreme weather. The U.S. Federal Communications Commission, alongside Asian network monitors, released a status report detailing massive regional cellular and internet disruptions. Typhoon Bevia has caused severe outages by heavily impacting both regional subsea cables and land infrastructure. It's a pretty stark reminder of the physical fragility of our global telecommunications networks.
Wow, we have covered a massive amount of ground today, right? From naval blockades in the Middle East hiking up our gas prices to historic shifts in national leadership and global law enforcement, everything is truly connected. So as you reflect on how these intertwined global stories directly impact our daily lives, I'm going to leave you with this question to chew on until our next explainer. With kinetic conflicts directly hitting our economies and established political norms shifting overnight, what is the next global domino to fall? Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive. Keep learning, and I'll see you next time.